Hello and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host Anna, and I'm back for good this week. I know I came back from my last hiatus and I announced another break because I was going to StokerCon, and I didn't want to leave you guys hanging too long. So once again, here I am. I'm back. And I'm really excited to share my conversation with this week's guest, Miss Wendy Dalrymple, the queen of pink horror herself. We talk about three of her works: her most recent release, Credenza, her short novella Cadaver, and then also her short story that was featured in the Punk Goes Horror anthology that came out earlier this year, Heads Will Roll. Wendy, I think, has some really good insights about feminine horror and pink horror, and she also writes Florida Gothic horror, which I really, really relate to as somebody from Louisiana. I believe that there's some shared DNA between the two of those places, Florida and Louisiana, so getting to chat with her was a true treat. And it would be remiss of me if I did not also sort of recount part of my StokerCon adventure. So stay tuned after my conversation with Wendy to hear a little bit more about that. I'm going to do my very best to not be too sappy or to spend too much time on it. But it was a really meaningful and impactful experience, so I do feel the need to comment on it, and I'll do so at the end of this episode. So for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation. Hi, Wendy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Anna?
I'm doing very, very well. It's hot, in Louisiana, as I'm sure it is in Florida.
Sure is. And rainy this time of year. So rainy.
Oh, it's been the absolute worst, those afternoon thunderstorms. I don't know if y'all get them, but ours are
Mm-hmm.
hellacious.
Yep.
But that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today a little bit.
Yeah.
You are a horror author. You write Florida Gothic horror. If people don't know who you are, though, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll move into what you write and then specifically some of your books?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Wendy Dalrymple, and I write pink horror, Florida Gothic horror, YA horror, and also a little bit of Gothic romance and rom-coms sometimes when I'm feeling fancy. And so, yeah, I'm located in Tampa Bay, Florida. I'm what you might call a Florida apologist. My state gets a bad rap, and a lot of times it's, well earned, but I love it here. I love the landscape. I love the culture and lifestyle here, and I'm a Florida native, so I appreciate the good parts of being here.
Yeah, I understand that. I relate to that a little bit in the Louisianian,
Yeah.
I know our strengths and I know our faults. So I try to fall back on those. But, really wanted to talk to you today. You just had a story come out called Credenza, and I kind of caught up on a few of your other works, and I wanted to talk about those. But in general, before we get to the really specific questions about those books, do you want to speak a little bit about what Florida Gothic means to you from the writer's perspective, like what you're channeling, what you're trying to hit on whenever you write in this subgenre and things like that?
Sure thing. Well, I think that most people have a pretty good idea of what Southern Gothic is, and Florida Gothic certainly is that. But there's another element of that I think is more, it blends in tropical Gothic because we have the beach and there's, hurricanes, and then, just the people here. Because I always, Florida is the melting pot of the USA, which is the melting pot of the world. So we have a really interesting condensed population of people here that's very, in some places it's not quite as, varied as others. But, we have Florida Man, who I think is becoming a cryptid in his own right. And it's just, we have a different, like, even here, like, how you get further south from the Florida-Georgia line, the less of the South it is, and that's also
Yes.
true on the coast. So yes, it is Southern Gothic, but it's also its very own animal. It's its own thing. It's its own vibe. And I just, whenever I write my Florida Gothic stories, I like to make Florida a character in itself. Like, it's really the landscape, the people, the vibrations of this place that I've always lived in. It really, I like to have that on the page.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's something really cool that you kind of tap into with Florida Gothic vibes. And it's like, have you seen Midsummer? It's
Of
like that
course.
horror.
Oh, of
Yeah,
course.
it's yeah, it's like that horror in the daylight kind of
Yeah.
sun-drenched, very
Hmm.
saturated horror. And to me, that feels almost a little bit more frightening
Hmm.
than,
Yeah.
dark, twisty horror. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't hide. It's like, maybe, or it's hiding in the daytime in the shadows somewhere. But like the intense heat and humidity and sunlight is very oppressive, and it can be dizzying. And I like to have that effect play out in my characters as it plays out in me in real life.
Yeah, well, it's a real thing. I mean, I know in
Mhm.
New Orleans, like statistically speaking, crime literally goes up whenever the temperature goes up because
Oh
everybody's
yeah.
tempers is done for. So that definitely raises the
It's
stakes.
it's like that part in Ghostbusters 2 where they're testing out all the people and they're slowly raising the temperature to see how crazy they get.
Yes,
It's for
exactly.
real.
For sure. And then the other aspect that you mentioned that you write a lot of is pink horror. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to see what pink horror means to you. And also I kind of want to like just have a discussion about pink horror in general
Oh,
because
yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of opinions on pink horror as it
Oh, for
stands in the
sure.
horror genre.
And I think that it's, my own definition is going to be different from other people's definition, and people are very go for it, like
Hmm.
whatever it is to you. But to me, it's when the horror of them presenting are reflected in the horror on the page. So childbirth, motherhood, menopause, just domestic violence, all those sorts of things that are uniquely femme from a femme perspective, and that's part of the nature of the storytelling and the horror. That's what pink horror is to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was kind of like a tomboy growing up, so I kind of shied away from pink. Like I've never been like a pink girly
Oh,
girl.
for sure.
And that's been
Yeah.
like an interesting kind of like conversation that I've had with myself in terms of like the horror that I enjoy because I love pink horror. But
Mhm.
for me, my knee-jerk reaction was like, oh, I don't know about that.
No, and I think that that's very fair, and I think a lot of people probably also have that, but I think for me also, I made the connection with like the pink tax. So like,
Hmm.
why are my pink razors 25 cents more than the blue razors that are the exact same thing? It's a very real thing that women and get targeted in that way with just the color pink. And I think that it's really helped people to resonate with my work, at least, and with the genre in general. Like, what to expect. And it doesn't necessarily mean the book has to have a pink cover or it
Oh
has to
yeah.
be very femme, but it's just that the injustice on the page is reflective of our real life experiences.
Yeah, and it's something that I now that I've grown into adulthood and I have confronted the pink tax in my adulthood, I have definitely felt more aligned with those feelings and like kind of grown into them as a woman. So pink horror definitely is home for me. Although I never, I don't know that I would have said however many years ago that it would be. So it's kind of a cool thing to grow into that relationship with this genre.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on a little bit more specifically to your books, your most recent release was Credenza, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you introduce the plot of this book because I don't want to accidentally spoil anything. So I'll go ahead and
That's
let you
okay,
just
because
talk
I might.
about it.
So,
Okay.
um,
Perfect, perfect.
so as the title may lead you to believe, the story is about a credenza, a piece of furniture, which is basically like a sideboard, a side table, a buffet, whatever you would call it regionally, wherever you're from, that you would have in your dining room. It's about a single mom, a woman named Veronica, who has been caring for her elderly grandmother who raised her. And after her grandmother passes, she inherits this piece of furniture. And as you may guess, through a horror lens, there's something wrong with this piece of furniture. It holds a lot more to her than a sentimental value, and she wants to hold on to it real tight because it's like the last thing she has of her beloved grandmother's. And so it's a cursed object story. It's about generational trauma. It's about mothers and daughters, and the expectations that come with being a mother or a daughter. And how that all weaves together with a piece of furniture might be surprising to some, and it might sound a little silly at first, but I think when you read it, it makes sense.
Oh, I think it makes a lot of sense having read it. And so, of course, kind of start this conversation about this book in particular, I always like to ask authors where their first nugget of inspiration or where the idea came from for this story.
Oh, for sure. So my own grandmother, after she passed a few years after that, I inherited a piece of furniture that it's more of like a cabinet, but that had been in her home for decades, that I remember seeing at all of our family functions, that I really liked. And I just kind of was surprised at the emotional attachment that I had to it, and I've always loved cursed object stories. And I was like, I think that I could do something here with all these elements. And so the story in the book is not reflective of my own family situation in any way, but it is reflective of how I felt about my grandmother and the sentimentality.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of really special that you're able to implement those personal ties into the story. And then moving on a little bit more into the specifics of the book, we talked a little bit about cursed object horror, and there's kind of like a lot of tropes and beats that come with cursed object horror. Like, we had Stranger Things with the clocks, has kind of become like the icon for bad things to come. And there's been countless cursed objects books, how did, that trope or the ideas and expectations of that trope influence your writing with this story?
Just in the way that, like, how can an inanimate object hurt you? Like,
Hmm.
not just in a psychological way, but in a physical way. Like, an entirely different piece of furniture in my grandmother's home actually did, like in the intro to this book, like cut me in the eyebrow when I was a kid. And like, it kind of like, messed me up for a little while when I was a little kid about it. And so just, yeah, as far as the whole, just putting so much meaning and feeling into an inanimate object, and just, I think that like dolls, right? Dolls
Yeah.
is one of my favorite cursed object tropes. And just now I've had so many people that have said to me after they read the book, they're like, I'm not going to look at a credenza the same way again. It's like, I'm going to give it the side eye. And so I just think that's kind of neat that people have had that reaction.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've read Philip Fracasse's Gothic is about, like that big haunted mahogany desk. And anytime I see like big or and now yours too, big ornate pieces of wooden
Uh-huh.
furniture, steering clear. We're
Yeah, you're like,
going
nope.
from yeah, minimalist, sleek, and modern around this house. Um, but
Uh-huh.
also,
Yep.
you with Credenza, I think the way that that story succeeds, is like you said, how does this inanimate object hurt you? Is you made it very personal, and you talked about like the mother-daughter relationships, the family dynamics, and honestly, it felt a little Gilmore Girls meets Cursed Objects, between the dynamics with the
Well,
mother and
that's great.
daughter.
That's wonderful. I love
Um,
that.
yeah, no, it felt very, tight knit, and where these two different women are at in their lives at their different ages and, with their relationship and such. But the story and like the quote unquote haunting of the Credenza is pretty far reaching. Like I was very impressed the places that you took that story. And I have to ask, was that always the plan? Did you have an initial story and it spread out from there, or?
No, that was always the plan. And this story may be connected mildly to another story that I have coming out from the same publisher in a way that is spoilerific. And
Okay.
so, but yeah, absolutely. I'm 100%. I absolutely admire people who can just like pants their way through a story and like get an idea and just go with it and write. But I cannot. I am an organizer to my own, detriment. And so when I get the idea for a story in my head, I plot it out, and then, you know, 80% of it is what goes into it, and there might be a few little surprises, but usually I have the whole thing figured out from start to finish.
Yeah, well, Thanksgiving dinner is a little ruined for me now, thanks to Credenza and the places that
It's a Thanksgiving horror, but I mean,
yeah,
you don't get a lot of those.
exactly. Exactly. And so, and you mentioned this a little bit more, but I wanted to kind of give you the space to elaborate on it. Well, you mentioned that it's a lot about generational trauma and family ties and kind of breaking the curse of, the curse before you. Do you want to speak a little bit about the themes that are implemented in Credenza in relation to that?
Sure. I think I'm a fairly empathetic person, and I like to look at a whole picture when I see, when you have somebody that their grandmother was married young,
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe they had a child who was married young, and then how does all that trickle down? And you can just see that this person was struggling in a time where maybe mental health resources were available to them. And so maybe you can still be hurt and still be like, yes, I don't have to, accept that I was hurt by this person, but maybe knowing why, the why of it is important for somebody's own healing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I think that when you understand generational trauma, whether you can sit with it and forgive or move on, at least having an understanding of where people came from a different time period, I think is always valuable.
Yeah. And that feels very real to life. I mean, I feel like we're all dealing with that every day in different ways. So I feel like that's really what brought some of this horror to life, the backstory, the emotional ties, the familial ties is related to this inanimate piece of furniture. But no,
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with what you were able to accomplish there with that. And this kind of ties into the next story that I wanted to talk to you about that I just read this week, Cadaver Bone. Do you want to go ahead and
Oh,
introduce the
yay,
plot of
that's one of
this one
my
as well?
Yeah, Cadaver Bone is super fun. It's one of my little pink horror novellas. It's short and it's snappy, and it is a story about a woman who had a knee injury and she had to have her ACL and MCL replaced, and it left her in the care of a not so great fiance. She kind of lost her mobility and a little bit of her autonomy for a while as she's healing from this. Um, Unbeknownst to her, she had some cadaver bone material used in the restructuring of her knee. And from there, things take a really wild twist, and she kind of goes into a little spiral. And I don't want to give away too much more on it, but yeah, so the basis of Cadaver Bone, the pink horror behind that is obviously bodily autonomy, and that's something that I think is important to most of us. So
Yeah.
I think that it's something that a lot of people can connect with.
Absolutely. Whenever I picked up Bone, I was expecting, like some pretty gnarly medical horror, which I did get. But you pulled off a really, really fantastic twist with the story. Do you ever find yourself kind of startling yourself whenever you're writing? Because some of the
Well,
scenes in
no, I
Cadaver
mean,
Bone are pretty gnarly.
like I said, I plan it out from beginning to end. So I do sometimes, like, you ever have your hair where it just like tickles you, like you turn the wrong way and it gets
Mhm.
you. So sometimes, yeah, I might do a little jump scare on myself, but usually not so much on my own story, so much as other people's story. If I know what's going on, I can get myself ready.
Very, very fair. Well, but to get back to the more specific plot of Cadaver Bone, and going back to the ideas of bodily autonomy, um, we set the scene pretty rough, like post-surgery, and the feeling of uncomfortableness, of healing, of not
Mhm.
being at full percent, and like you said, she's in the hands of her fiance who's not so great. And then things kind of just evolve from there, and then the story ends on quite the twist. But like you said, as it relates to autonomy, I think it says a lot about the choices that we make, about who we let in,
Mhm. Mhm.
about what we do whenever we're faced with these things. How did that all come from and torn ACL? Like, how did that all spin out? I'm very interested in how
Well,
that all became the bigger story that it
yeah,
became.
well, this story in itself was inspired by my own husband's knee surgery and me being a caretaker for him and seeing how
Mhm.
he struggled with it. And he had received cadaver material, which we're grateful for, but he wasn't even explained before the procedure that that would be a possibility. They thought he was going to have his own, and it didn't sit well with him for the initial period when he was just healing. He was like, "This is weird. Why didn't they say anything?" And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of our experience as women a lot of times. I had a
Yes.
similar thing happen with the birth of my first child, and I'm grateful. Like, I had to have something happen during my cesarean section that it just has to happen in the middle, and you feel so like helpless, and I didn't get to make that decision about myself. And so I think that that's something that a lot of us also have experienced, where we're not, if you're somebody that likes to be in control, especially like I am, and then to have to experience these moments of it's out of my control. That's really terrifying for me personally.
No, I very much relate. And I feel like I've talked to a lot of women, honestly, and like myself included, who have had medical related experiences or medical trauma in which something wasn't fully explained. Even whenever you're conscious and you're
Yep.
awake and you're consenting, they still don't fully explain what's about to happen. And you
Mhm.
walk out of there a little traumatized and worse for wear than whenever
Yeah.
you went in, you know?
Or you're not listened to about your symptoms. It's such a rampant thing for for women, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you did absolutely hit the nail on the head with that with Cadaver Bone. And by the end, like I said, I really want to talk about some parts of the story, but I don't want to give away the big twist. But I, it
Okay.
goes to an angry place and a little bit more of a violent place. And I was really on board with where you took that story, in the means and the context of where it went. But to move on to territory that we can maybe talk about a little bit more freely, we'll talk
Sure.
about your short story, Heads Will Roll in Punk Goes Horror,
I'm so
inspired
glad you
by,
read that. That was such a fun anthology to be part of.
yes, inspired by the song. And one, I mean, I obviously love the song. Two, the anthem was great, but in particular, your story was great. So how in the world did you land on this song to inspire that story?
Well, I will say that it wasn't just this song that inspired my story. I was inspired by a vast, like so many different punk, femme-led punk bands, Blondie,
That's great.
and the Bikini Kill,
Yeah.
Hole. There's a lot of different songs that deal with that went into workshopping this one in particular. There's a band that's very obscure called Glass Candy and the Shattered Theater, and they have a song called Be a Dolly, and the vocals that the lead singer, her name's Ida No, that she's screeching, and it's like this really crazy, powerful screeching like a banshee in the song. I
Yeah.
love it. So that song was one of the biggest, inspirations for this story for me. And it's basically like a love letter to all femme-led punk bands, and they had, they had a really hard time, a lot of them, just like getting out there. Um, I read Kathleen Hanna's book that just came out, I think it was last year, and just some of the stuff that she outlines in being a woman in punk
Hmm.
music. There's violence. Just like there's so many things that they were up against that a lot of their counterparts weren't. And so it was important for me for this story, obviously, to be a pink horror femme-led band.
Yeah, I feel like that connection is there with the story that you told, and like I can tell in your speaking about it, like how much you care about that particular subject matter, and how much you can relate to like finding your voice whenever it's kind of being muffled a bit. But in essence, I mean, the short story is about this
Mhm.
female group who's kind of like falling apart. They need to go perform. There's one girl who doesn't want to perform anymore, and then like chaos kind of just ensues, and then they find a way to make it work, and then what happens is just like truly something. And you have to read it to find out what it
Yeah.
is.
And
I
yeah.
adore that
And
story.
thank you. And the spirit of femme punk is supposed to be girls to the front. And that's something that is very important to me also, just in everyday, just supporting other women and boosting them up too. And a lot of what this story was is what happens when you're not supportive of other
Yeah.
women, how we can be our own worst enemies, and we can cut each other down, and we can step on each other to get to where we want to get. And then when you do that, it doesn't end well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of toy with the phrase or the idea of like losing your head a little bit, like losing your cool, losing your whatever. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's something that kind of gets thrown around with women, right? Like calm down, you're overreacting,
You're
you're
so
whatever.
hysterical. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so that tone, I think, within the context of the story, like really just did it for me. Like that was just, I thought it was so cool to have the title Heads Will Roll and then that messaging.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. It was lots of fun to write.
Well, I'm glad that it was a good time to write as it was to read. So those are like the three main things that I've read from you that have, kind of come out somewhat recently. And if readers are looking to read more of your work, where would you point them in terms of recommendations? Because you've written quite a lot.
I have. So I also had pink horror YA 90s nostalgia novella, Birthday Party Demon, that came out with Mad Axe Media just in February. And the sequel to that, Christmas Party Demon, is coming out this December. And it's just straight up fun. It's just nostalgia. Yeah. It's for the Fear Street, Christopher Pike, Goosebumps, grown-up kids, if that's something that you would like to revisit and just have a good time with. And then I also have an anthology that I am co-editing with my friend Grace R. Reynolds that's coming out from Bridget's Gate Press. And that has a lot of great authors in it. And it's called Poison Soup for the Macabre, Depraved, and Insane. And so that should be coming out later this year. It's a really fun collection of just like poems and short stories and essays. And it's a very like, it's like a warm hug for horror lovers, I think. And then next year, and then in February, my novel Bedrot Baby will be coming out with Quill and Crow, and that is a early 2000s, which I can't even believe. Like, I'm almost considering calling it a historic horror.
No.
I know. Don't come after me. It's a pre-Facebook era, pre-MySpace, flip phone, early 2000s story about a sugar baby who runs into a mysterious woman and literally and figuratively begins to rot. And so that's also a pink horror story. It's also fun and wacky, and I'm really excited for that one.
That one sounds great. I'm going to be on the lookout for that one. And I kind of want to pick your brain about this too. You know, we talk a lot about horror being like really serious, like grief horror and macabre horror, you know, and like, you know, the dreaded elevated horror. But I think that there's a lot to be said for the fun horror that you're talking about. Do you want to discuss a little bit like your relationship with fun and horror as a writer?
Oh, definitely. Like, so I love all kinds of horror. I love gothic horror. I love elevated, as you said, literary, whatever. I especially love like gothic, and that's and pulpy, and but I think that my particular brand of pink horror skews fun and a little less serious. When I seek out horror to read and to watch for myself, I'm looking for a good time. I'm looking for a roller coaster ride, and that's kind of what I want to give my readers. I want them to, I want them to have a good time, and for it to be, I don't know, just I think that there's a place for all of it,
Absolutely.
and I don't know, horror comedy just, if you can like give me a jump scare and a laugh in the same hour and a half of a movie, then that's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they work hand in hand, right? Like you have the catharsis of like the fear and resolution and the laugh. So it's always an interesting relationship to me whenever you can have things that are fun and also really jarring and horrific exist in the same space.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that it kind of like the movie Scream I watched in theaters when I was 14, and you get moments of the scares, the jump scares, and then it's tempered by the laughs. And it's ha ha, and then you just it's the up and down. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to go ahead and ask you this question. It's a little bit off the cuff, but what do you read kind of like, and like what are you reading right now? What do you normally read? And do you find that what you currently read affects how you write?
Oh, for sure. So I'm not in a writing period right now because it's summer and my kids are home and it's impossible. So I'm in a big reading mode. So what I read recently was Our Wives Under the Sea, which was very literary. And while I enjoyed it, it wasn't my usual fun read. It was like a serious read.
Yeah.
And so I like to read celebrity biographies because I'm very nosy about people's lives. And so I read a lot of indie horror. I like, Victorian Psycho. I read that this year. I really liked that. That was,
I love that one.
I would say that's a really fun one for me. It was fun. It was very tongue in cheek. I read, Blood on Her Tongue, which is a gothic, and that's Joanne I can never remember. Van Veen.
Yes.
I'm trying to think. Oh, and then I read one called Sky Daddy. I don't know if you've heard of Sky.
I have.
It's just a wacky, I like to read, I also call them like sad girl or weird girl books, which aren't necessarily horror, but are kind of horror adjacent. They kind of have that same flavor. Yeah, so those are some of my recent reads that I can think of off the cuff that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, Victorian Psycho had me feeling judging myself for how hard I laughed at some of the things that transpired within that book.
Well, and I think that that was the point, and that's where like you really saw the parallels to American Psycho, and that like this is so bonkers. This isn't really happening, you know.
Exactly. And I have to ask, have you read Debbie Harry's memoir?
I
I think it's
just finished it. I really did.
really okay,
Yes.
yeah. I listened to it on audio last year. I was wondering what you thought about
Mhm.
it.
I thought it was great. I thought it was actually really sad, just the way that she was very flippant about a lot of the sexual abuse that
Yeah.
she did. But I also thought it was really great because I think a lot of people don't think of Blondie as being punk, and
Yeah.
they really were. They were like at CBGBs before CBGBs was a thing. They were very gritty. She was broke as a joke for a lot of her career, really grinding and boots on the ground doing the work. And yeah, so I did. That's a celebrity memoir I literally just finished.
Yeah, it was so interesting because like I had looked up the book to get it, and then like I caught reviews of it, and people were like kind of bashing on it for her tone about certain things or whatever. But I think Debbie Harry, and I mean this is all just from a book, I don't know her, I don't know the woman, but I think that she's very like this is what it was and this is how it was and we had to deal with it and we did, and I think that people
Hmm.
wanted a little bit more of like a I don't know. I don't know what they really wanted, but I had a lot of respect reading it of like all the shit that they went through and still
Hmm.
accomplished what they did. And like particularly her, like with her solo career and like her acting career and all of that.
I'm like all the drugs that like I was telling my husband, I
Yes.
was like, she's like the femme Keith Richards or something. Like it's amazing she's still around. Like I had no idea.
I know. I had no idea about how sick they had all like that. I believe it was her boyfriend at the time had gotten
Hmm.
and all of that. I mean, that was just absolutely insane. So yeah, I think that was probably one of the last celebrity memoirs I had read. So it's funny that you had just read it.
We have similar tastes.
We do, we do. So I know you mentioned already kind of what you've been working on and what everything else looks like, but what does 2025 in particular look like for you?
Oh yeah, so later this year, Christmas Party Demons coming out.
Yes.
And then I also have a short story. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's going to be this year. It might be next year's anthology. But
Mhm.
Death by TBR has a Scary Stories to Tell in October anthology that's
Oh
coming out.
yeah.
And I have a short story that will be in that. And then my Poison Soup anthology that I co-edited, that's coming out later this year as well.
Perfect. And I know you just said that you're not in writing mode because it's summertime, but are you thinking of anything to write that you can talk about
Oh
at
yes,
this
oh
time?
yes. I have a story already mapped, already outlined and ready to go, and I might tap away at it a little bit as I get some time over the summer. But it's going to be another. It's funny you brought up Midsummer because it's a very
Yeah.
Midsummer adjacent story. It's obviously a Florida Gothic. It's obviously a pink horror, and this one's going to be more focused on motherhood. And and so that's all I'll say about it for now. But yeah, I've always got something in the works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you have quite the expansive backlist that I'm working through, so I feel like you keep that momentum rolling. But thank you so much, Wendy, for your time and for talking about all of your works. Is there anything that you wanted to bring up or discuss that we didn't touch on already?
No, I think we're all good. Thank you so much for having me.
No, of course, anytime. And like I said, I'll be on the lookout for everything else that you have coming out for the rest of this year. And I hope that everybody else goes out and picks up Credenza. I think it's a lovely little nugget of cursed object horror with a lot of heart. And like I said, it's got Gilmore Girls vibes too. So that's my pitch for you for Credenza. Thank you so much again, Wendy.
Thank you. It's a great pitch. Thanks, Anna.
And once more, a huge, huge thank you to Wendy Dalrymple for her time, for chatting with me across an array of her works as I desperately try and get caught up on her backlist, talking about pink horror, Florida Gothic horror, and everything in between. It was a really lovely conversation, and I do hope that you all go out and pick up one of her stories. They're really interesting, and I think she's got a really unique voice to talk about topics like bodily autonomy, the things that matter to women, all of those different things that surround pink horror. Now, this is where I'm probably going to get emotional and sappy. um, I am so grateful for this horror community. I try and mention it at least once on every podcast episode that I do. But being that this was my first StokerCon that I went to in person this year in Connecticut, and just getting to meet all of the people that I've grown so close with online has been truly like a remarkable experience. Being able to hug and scream and cheer and laugh and cry with the people that I've come to know so well for so long was a really, really, I knew it was going to be a good experience, but I didn't know it was going to be like that. Um, there were just some really special memories, some really special people that I got to meet and spend a lot of time with and get to know better. And above all, I always say their kindness, but their faith, their belief in what I do, whether it's the interviews that I do, the reviews that I write, everybody just truly across the board was just so incredibly kind to me and supportive of me. In my first year being there, quite frankly, I showed up with not anything to give out to promote this podcast, not anything to promote myself. I really just went to kind of take it all in and see what it was about. And it was, incredibly fun, a great social time, but I also learned a lot. I grew really close to a lot of people who I admire and respect so much, and I have a game plan for next year. We're gonna have stickers. We will be ready for next year. Um, but it's really a reinvigorating experience. I didn't realize quite how burnout I had felt prior to going on that trip. Sometimes, especially lately, I feel like with the way that social media has kind of disintegrated and sparsed out. It used to be that everybody was on the site that shall not be named, Twitter. And now everybody's all over the place. And so sometimes it feels a little lonely. It feels like you're yelling a little bit into a void sometimes whenever you're talking about things and you're maybe not getting a whole lot of traction online. And that's not certainly not the reason that I do this. It's definitely, I care a lot about the books that I read and I want to get them in readers' hands. And whenever that's what you care about so much, whenever you feel like you're not being heard, it can be a little disgruntling. But having been in person and spending time with these people who are listening and who do care about what I have to say, it just makes me want to keep doing this all the more longer. Do more episodes, do more projects, do more things, create more things, write more reviews. Yeah, like I said, this is an incredibly sappy monologue that I'm on here, but bear with me. Um, yeah, it has done wonders for my creative spark, and I hope that everybody who played a part in the weekend knows how much it meant to me. Coming home has been a little bit of a hard fall from grace after spending time with so many incredible people, but that's just like the best champagne problem to have. I mean, and even the people that I met that I didn't know before and like that I miss so much already, like what a wonderful problem to have, right? What an incredible community to be part of. So thank you all, heartfelt from the deepest corners of my heart. Um, Thank you all for being as kind and inclusive and welcoming and funny and charming and inspiring as you all are. Um, and to think I didn't even meet everybody. I mean, not everybody was at StokerCon. So there's much more of this to come in the future. Um, you all are lovely, incredible people. I cannot thank you all enough for the support that you all give me. And we'll keep this train running until the tracks run out, until we run out of steam. So um, thank you all again just one more time. There's really no words to what a weekend like the one in Stamford, Connecticut, the hellish place that is, means to a girl like me. So thank you again just once more. I hope that everybody in the horror community gets a weekend like that. It's just the best thing ever. Um, yeah. And so to be a little bit more professional now and to get back on the podcasting train, I have a couple of guests lined up that I'm really, really excited that I'm going to get to be talking to. Two of which are like all-star guests. I'm still having pinch me moments that they've agreed to talk to me for any length of time. So stay tuned for those. I'll be announcing those on my social media pages the closer that we get to those air dates. Um, yeah. It's hot out there, y'all. It's the summer. Stay cool. The world feels insane. Try to stay mentally cool as well if you can help it. Think of all of the small wins, the small victories, the small pieces of art, the small pieces of creativity that get you through the day. Share those with other people because that's what keeps us going. Um, yeah, and just thank you all one last time